Hi everybody, Ron Placone here. You're watching another edition of Media Bites. We're doing the live thing. I got to get better about, kind of doing this in advance and stuff like that and letting people know. But right now I'm just sort of getting my feet wet, and we are going to be moving locations soon. I'm going to have more information on that next week. And a quick plug for anybody in Johnson City, Tennessee. This weekend, Friday and Saturday night, I will be at the Johnson City Comedy Zone in Johnson City, Tennessee. So any East Tennessee folks, come out and say hello. That'd be really cool. Johnson City Comedy Zone. I think there's two shows a night. I think 8 and 10:30 Friday and Saturday. So check that out if you're in the area. So the minimum wage bill, it's blocked. And the discussion has been that this is totally not going to happen, that this is, I read a comparison somewhere where someone said, the minimum wage thing going through it is as likely as Republicans repealing Obamacare. It's just not going to happen. And this is just, the Democrats trying to just really push this, and it's kind of just political theater at this point, which I think is very disturbing. And I think part of the reason that it's this way apparently is because of media failure, which is of course a theme of what we do here at Media Bites. But the discussion has always been, oh well, most Americans favor raising the minimum wage. Republicans have these reasons why the minimum wage should not be raised, but Democrats want it. That's pretty much the extent of the discussion that you've seen so far. What I would love to see, more of a discussion of why a minimum wage exists in the first place. And the reason for a minimum wage is so that somebody on the minimum wage has enough. They have enough to live. So if the minimum wage is not doing that, if somebody working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week on the minimum wage does not have enough to cover their rent and to have adequate food and clothing, well, then there's a problem with the minimum wage, and it needs to be increased. That's all there is to it. And $7.20, I mean, it's not enough. And if that needs to be raised to $10.10 an hour, well, then that's what needs to happen. We don't talk about the idea of why a minimum wage exists in the first place and why it's necessary. The discussion's only about kind of just the ins and outs of it and the different perspectives, and I think a lot of those perspectives are, it's always just one extreme or the other, and that's why we don't really accomplish anything. Look, I understand that economics plays a role here. I get that. There is a point where if the wage is at a certain level, it will impede on job creators' abilities. But $10.10 an hour, I mean, that's more the bare minimum that people need to live. Working 40, 50 hours a week, that's what they need to live. So I think that, this is just, it's not saying that that's not a factor. It's saying that, well, no, and heaven forbid we look at what these CEOs are making. I mean, I put a link there of, the CEO at McDonald's makes $9,200 an hour. And the way that was comprised, by the way, was that they took what the CEO makes annually and then they divided it by 60 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. Now, look, I'm not going to assume that I know how much a CEO works. I don't know. But 60 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, I'm going to say I doubt it's that much. So in reality, they're making even more. The wages are even different than that. But I want to stay on this McDonald's scenario to kind of illustrate, some of what I'm talking about when we have this discussion and we don't see the broader picture. I saw something once where people were talking about, like, McDonald's, for instance, say that they paid, all their workers $10.10 an hour. They said, well, that would cause the price of their product to go up, and it would cost a lot more, and, well, maybe that's not a big deal for you because maybe you don't eat at McDonald's or whatever, but some people live in food deserts where McDonald's a viable option for them, and that's, the best they can get. So now they're going to be price gouged and this is not going to work. This is going to hurt the economy. This is going to hurt jobs, whatever. Okay, so let's go on that argument, and here's the what's going on there. Why, first of all, this country has enough wealth and has enough resources that a dollar menu is not an adequate substitute for having access to food and access to groceries. I mean, the fact that there's food deserts in general in this country is very bothersome, and it shouldn't be an issue. Second of all, again, let's look at the CEO's compensation. Let's look at the compensation from the top and see how that can help employees. Why do we automatically have to go like, well, any increase in wages is automatically going to be put on the consumer? That's what the GOP does to kind of instill fear. That's why that happens. But even if that was the scenario, even if that was how things were going to go down, and it was, well, wages are going to go up, but prices are going to go up at McDonald's or whatever. Like if someone came to me and they said, okay, Ron, here's the deal. Scenario A, the Big Mac costs $2 or $3 more, but food deserts do not exist in the United States because everybody is making an adequate wage to live, and grocery stores can sustain themselves. There's no longer food deserts. Or scenario B, that Big Mac stays the same price. I can promise you 100 times out of 100, I'm going to choose scenario A. 100% of the time. So now, granted, I don't need a McDonald's. I really don't. So, but even if you do, like that's just those are much higher stakes. And I know like this is one example, and this is kind of, like a hypothetical thing that I'm bringing into the discussion here. But, you take that example and you apply it to the bigger picture, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're focusing on, these nitty-gritty things. It's like, well, what about this and that and prices and this, and we don't see the bigger picture where a minimum wage exists so that people have enough to get by. Do they have they're not going to live in luxury necessarily, but they have enough to get by. If a minimum wage isn't doing that, well, then it's failing, and the minimum wage needs to be raised. We don't have the discussion that way. Instead, we focus on these little episodic scenarios, and well, the GOP said it'll slow the economy because of this, and it'll slow jobs because of this, and we don't focus on the bigger picture. And we certainly don't focus on, heaven forbid, we entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, there should be a bit of a cap on CEO compensation. Heaven forbid we go there. So I think it's really disturbing that we're not able to, get past these very short-sighted obstacles to have a much more important discussion on the minimum wage. And I think a lot of reason for that is because the media is not approaching it from that way. The discussion is not being approached from that perspective, and the majority of Americans do favor an increase in the minimum wage, and I think that's because if you ask a general person, hey, do you want somebody that works 40, 50 hours a week to just have enough to survive? They're going to say yeah. They're going to want that person in a home. They're going to want that person to have food in their belly, access to a doctor, and everything. Enough to live a reasonable life. And you know what? There's enough wealth in this country that we can do that, and we can do that feasibly if only the discussion would be steered in a better direction. And I think, again, that's a statement to the failure of the main corporate media on this. So, feel free to leave your comments on what's going on with that bill. We'll probably talk about that more as it unfolds. And you've been tuning in to a live broadcast from Media Bites. Again, there's going to be some big news next week, so, be sure to check that out. And also, any Johnson City folks, maybe I'll see you this weekend at the Johnson City Comedy Zone. And have a nice weekend. This is Ron Placone signing out.